Well, guys, who could have believed this? When I started out, all way back there mid-March, with the idea of providing some kind of encouragement for people when we were faced with so much fear and anxiety, I thought I might do one evening, of a live session, just reminding you of techniques and stuff we could use. But oh my God, we just started following the coincidence. Who would have believed that here we are, Jimmy Moore, sandwiched between Professor Tim Noakes and Dr. Eric Westman. Oh my God. And the thing, of course, is they're two big giants. But really, the biggest man in the field here is Jimmy Moore. Jimmy Moore, if you don't know about Jimmy Moore, then you know what? You really have to get to know. And what I suggest is, once you find out what he's about, you've got to ask yourself, where are you heading? Where are you heading after you've found out more about him? Now, here's the thing. There is nobody else on the planet, in my humble opinion, that knows anything more about health than this guy. Longest ever health podcast on the planet, that's enough, but lots of other podcasts, thousands of them, a dozen books in publication. This guy is awesome, but here's the point. He's interviewed the leaders and people, by the way, who don't necessarily support the idea of low carb and keto. This guy, Jimmy Moore, has interviewed everybody that matters, hundreds and hundreds of them. Who else could possibly know more than Jimmy Moore? So what a privilege for us that he's given us an hour of his time. Look forward to the rest of this hour. It's going to blow us all away. So Jimmy Moore, welcome to our little show. It's an absolute privilege, and I'm really humbled, and I'm sure all the people watching are humbled by your presence here. Thanks for giving us your time.
Hey, Jack, I should get you to introduce me on every podcast I go on, man. That was awesome.
So, Jimmy, the thing is, a lot of the people who are going to be watching this do know you, because I'm forever telling them about you, ever suggesting they listen to podcasts with you. And some of them have joined me on this journey. Some already were on it, keto and low carb. But a lot of them don't really know who you are. And so it might be quite useful if you could give us a little bit of an introduction to your story, which is awesome, but it'd be fascinating.
Yes, it was a long, long time ago, it feels like, but in some ways it doesn't feel that long ago at all. And I try to keep the prescientness of what I was so I never forget from whence I came. But 2004 was when I started on the Atkins diet. So how did I find the Atkins diet? It was 2003. I got a diet book for Christmas that year, a couple weeks before the new year, a diet book for Christmas. And so somebody sent me a not so subtle hint that, hey, dummy, you need to lose weight. And so it was Dr. Atkins' New Diet Revolution. Again, in 2003, I got that book at Christmas. So I'm like, okay, what the heck? This guy's kind of whacked. Eat more fat? Like, don't you clog your arteries eating more fat? Eat less carbs? Like, how am I going to not be sluggish all day? You need that for energy, right? But I had tried all the low-fat diets, and like everybody else, tried them, willpowered my way to lose a little bit of weight, starving all the time, and finally go and binge and gain back the weight. That was kind of the way it went. And so January 1st, 2004, I tried this Atkins diet, and I'm not going to lie, first 3 days, I wanted to kill myself. The pain was so horrible. Now I realize now some of that was electrolyte imbalance. Some of that was other things that I could mitigate. But here's Jimmy Moore trying to do it on his own, just reading a diet book. Yeah. It was rough. But the cool thing was, after about 3 days of kind of misery, I realized very quickly I wasn't hungry. I wasn't craving. Now I still had desires for things, but I wasn't having this intense, I have to go eat Taco Bell or I'm going to die. It was just this, yeah, I'd like it, but okay, I'm good. And after about a week and a half, 2 weeks, my brain started clearing up. I'm going, what in the world is going on? Because usually by that point in a diet, I'm so miserable. I'm like white knuckling it to get to sleep. I'd go to bed early just so I wouldn't have to eat, because I wasn't allowed to eat because I was keeping my calories low before. But with a low carb diet, I was like, oh, wow, I'm good. Like, I'm not hurting. and I was 410 pounds. I hear in your voice you're from Ireland.
Scotland.
Scotland. Sorry, I didn't mean to insult your
Okay.
Scottish. So what's about 185 kilo, maybe? It was I was a big boy. And so I was able to go on the Atkins diet. And of course, people always look at the weight loss benefits. And that while that was cool, I found over time, man, all of these health changes were the most fascinating to me. At the time, I was on 3 prescription medications. I had high blood pressure medication. I had high cholesterol and a breathing thing. I got off the breathing meds really fast within like 6 weeks of starting low carb. I was still a big boy, but I got off of that. The blood pressure I had to come off within about 3 months because I was blacking out when I would stand up. My blood pressure was going too low. So I stopped taking it. The cholesterol one I hung on to for a very long time because I still bought into the saturated fat giving you heart disease. So I thought, well, at least this will mitigate the effects of that fat. Yeah. And about 9 months in, I'd lost a significant amount of the total 180 that year. I think in August of that year, August, September, I had already lost maybe 140 of it. And I'm like, why am I still taking this drug? I'm obviously getting healthier. And so I came off of that drug, and I've yet to take another drug since then in the 15 years since then. But yeah, I went on to lose 180 pounds at the end of the year. The Atkins company contacted me and they said, hey, we heard you lost some weight on our diet. I said, yeah, just a little bit. And they were like, well, can we feature you on the front of our website? So they did a big story of me on the front of the website. Ironically, I never ate any of the bars or took any of the shakes. I didn't even know about the Atkins products. I just did real food. Yeah. And that's the way I did it. And there's a lesson there for people. Don't get caught up in the hype of low carb keto products when the only products you need is real food and your brain's thinking through some things, which we'll talk about here today. But yeah, that's about 5 months later, I decided to start a blog, Living La Vida Low Carb blog. And then 1 year later, the Living La Vida Low Carb show, which you said earlier is the longest running health podcast on the internet. So 1,600 plus episodes and counting.
Yeah, amazing. Just amazing. And endless other podcasts. I mean, you know, Keto Talk and all that sort of stuff. It's fantastic. I mean, I don't think there's a better resource on the internet than what you've provided us with. It's just fantastic.
Thank you. I have tried to be a translator because I think what happened in the online world, at least in the early days when I first started, was you had all these wonderful doctors who didn't connect with an audience.
No.
They didn't know how to speak English to regular people. And so I was like, okay, Dr. Eric Westman, for example. Okay, Eric, come on. So I will let you talk. And if you say something that's a little funky monkey that I'm like, I know my listeners don't know what you're saying, I'm going to get you to translate, or I'm going to translate for you. And it worked. That was kind of the formula for why people started gravitating to my work. Is there was nobody translating before I came around. Now there were a few people trying, but the reason it clicked so well was people liked my voice. And so I started speaking and I would translate. Then I would attend conferences, like very high respectable medical conferences with Dr. Westman and Dr. Volt, Dr. Finney back there on the wall, all of these like leading voices in the keto space. And I would learn from them. And if I didn't understand something, like the whole concept of gluconeogenesis, when they first started mentioning it, I heard that first in a conference in about 2007 or 8. Yeah. And I went up to Eric and I said, Westman, and I said, okay, explain that. And so he started explaining the mechanism, the biochemistry, and I was like, okay, wow, that's kind of cool. He's like, oh, stick around. You're going to learn a lot more. And I have over the years, you know, and you shift some of those thinkings about those as well, but it's just adding to the knowledge. But then once you have the knowledge, you can share it in explainable language. Now, sometimes when you share it, and I hate the phrase dumb it down, but when you make it easier to understand, sometimes you lose a little bit of the definition. So I think you get people at a very basic level to understand it. Then you back up and you get them to think harder about it. I'll tell you what, when I wrote Keto Clarity, the whole purpose of Keto Clarity was not to be the be all end all of everything you would ever want to learn on ketosis. No, it was by design an introductory book that if you don't know anything about keto, you're going to know a lot more about keto after you read the book. But then you're going to be so excited to want to learn more. You go read some of the nerdy books by people like Volek and Finney and all the rest that are out there.
Well, you know, Keto Clarity was the first book I read on it. You know, in terms of, and someone who's going to be watching this gifted it to me at one of my courses. And because for years before, I was recommending wheat belly and grain brain and stuff like that. And my journey started a way back in the sense of, you know, Atkins. I got that book, and because my reason hasn't been about weight loss or anything. I'm fairly okay with that. Mine is about a health challenge. And I also, like you, have traveled around the world and been a speaker on big stages, big events. And my thing was to be at my maximum performance levels for audiences. I'm very active on a stage. I don't stand still. I'm all over the place, sometimes in the audience, jumping up in chairs and all sorts of stuff. I'm full of energy when I do it. But I 9 in the morning to 7 at night sometimes, I needed to make sure I managed my health, my energy. And so I got into Atkins for that. And then, as I say, that's when I picked up grain brain in an American airport somewhere, and then wheat belly the other way around, whatever way it was. I was ready for Keto Clarity when it showed up, because I drifted away from that stuff. I was having some challenges, and your book shows up. And just to again, I don't want to blow smoke too much here, Jimmy, but the truth of the matter is, right, is without you doing what you did in terms of translating, I think a lot of us would have missed the bus. Because certainly there are some really geeky people out there. I'm talking geeky, they're not geeky, they're professional people, they're professors and they speak their language. But for a guy like me, who's more a right brain kind of guy rather than the left brain, it just goes over my head. What you did was you made it all accessible. And then what I found, like lots of others, I found I was able to trust myself to go and seek out some of the geeky podcasts, you know, to go Paul Saladino and listen to him rabbit on about stuff that goes over my head. But because I recognize a lot of it, I know, oh, that's what Jimmy's talked about. And I thought, you know, what you've done is just absolutely extraordinary. And it's a great resource for people just coming into it. And the thing is, you can go right. I mean, when I first found you, I was traveling up and down to France. I was in the car. I was just go back, find another one. They were just fantastic. So the thing is, Jimmy, is one of the reasons why we get into this, or I get into this, as I said, was back in March. COVID was beginning to really frighten the life out of people. The media have handled it here, and obviously we're not in America, but in particularly the UK, very threatening, very frightening. I do, you know, I because of you, I end up listening to people like Paul Saladino, and I'm listening to people like the Fat Emperor, you know, Ivor Cummings, and he's blowing open, especially his podcast this week. He's just blowing open the whole thing about lockdown. But the thing is, it was frightening. So we got into this thing. And I just wonder, you know, given that we've been on a journey now on the planet for a good few months now with COVID, where have you reached in terms of protecting yourself or thinking forward? What sort of advice would you give people watching this? With COVID, we'll get much more to talk about, but maybe just get that one out of the way, since that was our purpose originally.
Yeah, so when it came to America, they were calling it basically the Black Plague without calling it that. And I thought, okay, I'm going to take this seriously. It was mid-March when they put us all on lockdown here. The first thing I did was up my vitamin D. So I generally took maybe about 10,000 IU a day. And of course, it wasn't quite sunshiny like it is here in the summertime in the States, and summertime there as well. Sometimes I'm on Aussie podcasts, and it's the other side of the other end of the spectrum. So that's why you're on the same one. But yeah, so I started taking about 35,000 IU of vitamin D3 a day. And I knew from my knowledge of health that was going to help boost immunity. I also take a multivitamin, which includes vitamin C and zinc, all these other things that can help boost that. And see, here's the thing, like if you came into this pandemic relatively healthy, doing all the things, eating real food, minimizing carbohydrate, eating healthy fats, blah, 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 you don't really need to be real concerned about COVID-19. Like, I'm not saying that you're immune to it, but your body is certainly in a great position. And of course, now that the data has come in with all these unfortunate people that have succumbed to this disease, the ones that have succumbed, age is a big factor, and metabolic health, the comorbidities is a big factor. They throw obesity in there, but I think that's somewhat of a misleading statistic, because generally those who are obese tend to have the comorbidities, tend to have metabolic disturbance. So is it the obesity or is it the metabolic disturbance? I would argue the latter and not the, because there are some people, and I still have weight on my body, but I'm far more protected against this thing than someone that would have weight on their body with all those other issues in their metabolism going on. And then everything anti-inflammatory that I can do. So curcumin, and lowering blood sugar. So things like cinnamon and berberine. I'm doing kind of a gamut of things. And to date, I've taken 2 antibody tests. I do not have the antibodies. And I have not had a COVID-19 test, but I've been reading a lot lately on T cells in your immune system, fighting this thing off long before you would get any antibody production. So I'm wondering how many people, maybe myself included, have had this thing and fought it off with our T cells, and there's no trace of it was in our body and it fought it off. I will tell you, there was one day about 2 months ago, one full day, I had a whole slate of podcasts for that day. I was out like a light, man. I got up, I came here to do my Jimmy Rant show right here, and I was like, I don't feel so well. And I was just like really just dead tired. And I go lay down, I sleep for a few hours, I wake up, I eat a little bit of something, and 30 minutes later, I'm right back down in the bed again. And then I come up from that, and I'm up for about an hour, and then I go right back to bed for 9 hours. That night, I was out. Something was happening in my body. And I thought for sure I got COVID-19. And I went and got the antibodies test shortly after that. Not a trace. So I'm wondering if my T cells fought it off at that point. Now, that's all anecdotal, so don't take anything. But interesting when you start putting these kind of pieces of the puzzle together. Are we really counting the number of people that have actually been exposed to this accurately? And of course, we can talk about death rates and cases and all that. But I think at the end of the day, we need to be more concerned with maybe those people who are asymptomatic that had it, their T cells fought it off, and we don't know they've had it, and yet all this fear kind of persists out there.
Can I ask you a question that I suspect some of the people who watch this would probably want me to ask is, if someone is doing what you're saying, they understand the vitamin D thing, so they get out in the fresh air more, they're getting some sunshine, they may be supplementing, they're doing the vitamin C thing, they've got the zinc thing going, and some other things. So they're adding that, but they're not necessarily coming off processed carbohydrates and or the junky foods and or the vegetable oils. Do you think that the whole vegetable oil, processed carb thing, excessive fruit and carbohydrate veg and stuff would still be an issue for them, or do you think they can get away with that?
Oh, it would have to be an issue for them, because in my book, Cholesterol Clarity, we talked about there's 2 twin villains in your diet: carbohydrates and vegetable oils, seed oils. And so the reason we call those the twin villains has nothing to do with them as a food. It's what they do in your body. And of course, Cholesterol Clarity, we were talking a lot about cardiovascular health. And so if you want to lower cardiovascular risk, you lower inflammation. And so that's how you reduce those refined carbohydrates primarily, but really all carbohydrates, refined or otherwise, even the so-called healthy whole grains aren't that healthy. And then the seed oils, because of the inflammatory response. And what happens with COVID-19, it gets into your body, the first thing it does is this big cytokine of inflammation. And so if you already have elevated levels of inflammation, and then this COVID-19 hits you and adds more inflammation, you're already a sitting duck on fire. But
Yeah.
if you have minimal inflammation in the body's kind of chill because the immune system has not had to deal with the carbs and the vegetable oils. This is the
Yeah.
thing. Your immune
Yeah.
system's
Yeah. Yeah.
constantly fighting off the inflammation. Then when you get COVID-19 with the lowered inflammation, you see this red alert, and then the firefighters come and put out the fire of COVID-19 and get it out of you. So I think you give yourself a more of a fighting chance if you get off of that. And here's the thing. People are like, well, I already eat it. I can't really change that quick. 4 weeks, you can metabolically shift everything in your body.
Yeah. I mean, Ivor Cummins suggested you can do it in 10 days, certainly 14 days in one of his shows a while ago. And we had him on here and he blew everybody away, you know, like you're doing now. And I think that I just hope people can hear this. I know you've said it endlessly and I've heard it endlessly. I think people got their, like ostriches, they've got their head in the sand over this stuff about processed carbs and oils. It really is it's a serious issue, isn't it? Is there anything else that given that you've interviewed so many big names and so many researchers and professors and so on and so forth, is there anything else that's currently on your consciousness that you would want to share with people to inspire them to change? Is there anything that's really concerning at the moment or it's hot on your mind?
In terms of getting off the carbs?
The current dynamic about COVID and about the fears of COVID.
Here's a big one that I don't hear a lot of people talking about. Okay, get the sunshine, move, eat well, all the supplements, all that. Stress. My God, here in America, I have been posting lately all of these like viral videos of people going crazy in the stores. I just posted one as of the recording of this just this morning of this lady who accosted this family. She said to those little kids, you're all going to die. Yeah. Now, it's like those kinds of things don't just happen. They happen because you have stress that is unresolved in your body. And if you allow stress to persist in there, people just think stress, okay, I just have a bad day and it makes me moody. Okay, that's the mental health aspects, and that's big. Physiologically, that stress is adding more inflammation. It's raising insulin and blood sugar. Your cortisol's going, I don't know what's going on up there. Sounds like you're getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger. So let me boost this out. And your hormones get out of whack, which then affects your brain health and makes you tell little children they're going to die. And so this is a big one. I wish, and I know there's some people that are trying to calm things down, but the fear, the uncertainty, the I don't know what's going to happen next kind of mode, which I think is somewhat deliberate, is making people go crazy in their head. I think the next pandemic is not going to be a virus. It's going to be the mental health effects of all the fear that was around this virus.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the media over here, it's they're still playing on the fear. That's not going away. Building up to expect something horrific in the autumn into the winter. But anyway, I'm just wondering how best to go next with this. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll maybe do this. One of the things that's happened as we have morphed along with these sort of Wednesday night live things is I have an idea called, my brand is called Mind Store. Yeah. And for 30 years, I've been doing stuff all around the world. We're very, very fortunate. Written some books and stuff like that. And stress management's been a huge part of this. But what happened in the last fortnight was a bunch of us who are on here, we got about 30 people to participate with a company called NutriSense, who do a continual glucose monitor thing. Yep.
Right.
And the 30 of us shared what was going on through the Facebook page so that we could all, but inevitably, I think I attracted to it people who are already keto orientated or low carb orientated. And we were experimenting with foods to see what happened, when you go into the red zone and so on and so forth. Obviously, what we didn't attract, unfortunately, was anybody who claimed to be a vegan or a vegetarian or whatever it would be, and people who were just doing the normal thing. So we couldn't quite compare. Yeah. But part of the reason why, and I did a workshop on here last Wednesday for people, was I've got this notion of mind store centurions. I'm 65 now, so just when I was turning 60, I started to think about longevity, and so on. And I stood in front of an audience in Glasgow, and I said, I'm thinking of creating mind store centurions. Let's all, to use our language, let's all program. We get to 100 fit, healthy, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and then you just pass away in your sleep, sort of thing. Yeah. And what's become clear for me is that in order to reach the furthest I can healthily in every aspect, at the moment for me, it has to be a keto type thing or certainly a low carb thing. Have you any views on, given that you've talked to so many? I mean, we had Professor Tim Noakes last time. There he is. We're talking about it. He's only eating like, I think it was 5 or 6 foods, basically. He's really narrowed it down. He's almost a carnivore. What do you know about it, Jimmy? Because I mean, you've got so much knowledge. What do you think about longevity? What might be a way forward for people listening?
Oh yeah, I mean, longevity is a big reason I do what I do, along with all the health benefits. But see, here's the thing. So like, as you get older, you said you're 65 years old. Generally, when people get that age, they start to have various things shift in their body. One of the things that shifts is you tend to have higher cholesterol. So I don't know what your cholesterol level is, but you tend to have higher levels of cholesterol. And of course, a GP will look at that and go, oh my gosh, you're becoming diseased. No, your body is getting into being prepared to live longer, being prepared to, in case the predictable inflammation that happens as you get older comes along, you've got cholesterol that can deal with that. See, this is we demonized cholesterol in the body. We stopped educating people that it has a good purpose in the body. One of those purposes is anti-inflammatory, which helps you live longer. And so, no, I think that what you're doing, I think what Professor Tim Noakes is doing, minimizing his foods to just more kind of a carnivore diet. I've moved more in that direction. I'm in my late 40s, and I feel like this kind of is the sweet spot for me. I'm not saying that it is for everyone, but I do think that at best, we should all be focusing most of our nutrition on kind of animal-based foods and then adding things to that, but not too far out in the stratosphere, and most certainly not all those processed low-carb keto things that are out there. But sticking to real food, making the fat and protein, the natural sources of it, the basis of the meal. And if you want to add some non-starchy vegetables or some low-sugar fruits, depending on your metabolism, I think that's what sets you up best for longevity, along with the lifestyle things of sunshine, fresh air, movement, all the rest of the sleep, good sleep, all the rest of the things that we've been talking about.
Yeah. What interested me personally, and I shared this in a post earlier on today, is when I went through the fortnight with the continual glucose monitor and the NutriSense app with their support of a nutritionist, I was in the green zone, thankfully, but higher than other people. And I suggested to them it was because of my age, and they said, yes, your age does raise it. And, for people interested in the centurion notion is, again, if someone like myself is getting fairly high scores and I've been keto more or less for 4.5 years, then people who aren't and who are just willy-nilly eating the usual stuff, oh my God, this is what's interested me. And certainly one of the things that I had to confront with myself was I'd managed to get fairly stressful, and yet I made my living out of teaching people how to manage stress. And there I was, and when I was looking at it, I go, what is it? Some stress there. There was stress. Not meditating enough, just getting, and not maybe doing as much yoga as I should be because I'm caught up in a busy lifestyle again. So I'm grateful for you mentioning the whole thing about stress. But the other thing is, I keep saying this is I'm using a sort of a phrase here, a wide church. Yeah. At one end of it, you do have the carnivores and the people heading that way, but you also have your buddy like Dr. Will Cole, who came out with Ketotarian, and certainly listened to him and you sort of, in various stuff, various sort of podcasts, his notion that I think he would like to do it with more plant-based, sort of approach from what he was saying then. I don't know what he's saying now. People can do it as a vegan, can't they? They can do it as a vegetarian and anywhere in between towards carnivore. Would that be still the case, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's challenging. And of course, we have this notion still that plant good, meat bad is still out there. And of course, there's a lot of kind of vegan propaganda that's boosted by billionaires around the world. And people don't realize the reason it's such on your radar screen. This 3% of the population at any given moment is on a vegetarian, vegan style type of diet. Only 3%. And yet the way they get the media with the documentaries like What the Health and all these that have been out there, they're probably films, and they keep regurgitating all the same epidemiological research, which doesn't really tell you anything new. Oh, eating meat is the equivalent to smoking X number of cigarettes. Okay, that was not a valid study, and yet they tout it as if it's gospel truth. So I think that kind of challenges this a little bit, that people still, if you say, hey, are eating plants healthy? Absolutely. Is eating meat healthy? No. So when you have that kind of common belief system, it's hard to get people to wrap their heads around why a mostly plant-based diet would not be healthy. Now, with all due respect to my colleague, Dr. Cole, I don't think you can quite get there just adding in a few eggs and fish to a whole lot of vegetables for people that are severely metabolically broken. And there was a study just a couple of years ago that said 88% of the population has some level of insulin resistance, which means only 12%, and this is the American population, only 12% of the American population is even healthy enough, insulin sensitive enough to be able to handle a diet like that. So I think you kind of lead people down the wrong path. I'm not saying you should only eat meat, but start with that as your basis and then branch out from there to see what your tolerance is.
Yeah, I mean, on my health journey, I'd done endless cleansing things, I was 12 years vegan, vegetarian, so I went through all of that phase of my life. But it's quite, and bizarrely, in the last week of the NutriSense experiment, I was totally carnivore. If you'd said to me all those years ago I'd be a carnivore even for a day, I'd have said no chance. But the thing of course is that when I keep saying this, I've invented a word. All the time I was vegan, vegetarian, I was actually a grainarian. That's my word, grainarian. Because what I was doing was I was adding vegetables to grains. It was pasta, it was rice, it was pizzas, you know the thing. But it was really high grains. It wasn't until I came across wheat belly and grain brain I realized, oh my God, that's why I actually got ill with inflammation. Yep. And that's all gone now, thankfully. So the other thing I wanted to ask is, one of the things I love is listening to you ranting. It's just, you get in there and you go for it, and it's fantastic. So the thing about, again, you, apart from all of your experience now, all these years, all this stuff that you've learned, you're keeping up to date, Jimmy. And I know in mine, it's not easy to do that because we've got lives as well, yeah? But you do. And again, going back to something I said there, I mean, what are the current things that are flashing into your consciousness from your awareness that people maybe really need to kind of start getting their head around or go and seek out information on?
Yeah, man, there are so many areas that are developing still. Like I'm thinking about the microbiome specifically. It's like we kind of poo-pooed it for a little while. Oh no, just keep your carbs low. And I'm like, okay, but there's a there. And now that we're understanding more of the gut being more like a second brain and how it impacts your actual brain and all the other processes, I think the next kind of big move of understanding and learning has to be gut health. Now, I remember being in the paleo community about a decade ago, and they were all about gut health from the start. And that's where it kind of came on my radar screen for the first time. No, you got to fix your gut. It's the source of where autoimmune disease comes from. It's really the source of all things about your health. And if you fix the gut, you fix your health. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. But it's funny because ideas get out there. And sometimes they step ahead of what the science is showing. Well, now we're getting more science to come in verifying some of this. Now, you can have arguments about what the diversity of the species means for this group. I remember there was the American Gut Project did a study of paleo people and keto people and vegan people to compare what their gut microbiome composition looked like. Oh, the keto people were far worse than the paleo people. And I'm like, well, how do we know that? Like, they stepped ahead of the science. We haven't really vetted out what does it mean when you're in a state of ketosis? What's that mean to your gut health? When you're eating maple syrup and high starches with your paleo diet, what's that look like? When you don't eat any animal-based foods at all, what's that look like? We don't know all those answers. They're still vetting it out. I would say pay close attention to that. I would also say one of the developments that I'm real excited for people to be thinking about is when you're able to test your insulin at home. Right now, you can test your blood sugar, you can test your ketones, but you cannot test insulin at home. When we can do that, Jack, it's game change time, because everything about everything we always believe about nutrition and its impact on our health will change. Because a lot of people, well, I prick my finger when I have X food and therefore I'm healthy. My insulin didn't spike. I'm like, you know nothing about insulin. You know what happened to blood sugar. What if your insulin went way high to make that blood sugar get in that healthy range? You won't know that until you can test at home. I think we're about 5 to 10 years away from that being reality. So keep that on your radar screen. I could go in a million directions with this question you asked, but yes, I try to stay very cutting edge.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the insulin thing. I mean, it just, when you start to open your mind to it and research it and listen to podcasts about it or wherever you get your information from, it does blow you away to realize that's really what it's all about. And yeah, I mean, 10 years, God, can we wait 10 years to have that stuff? I mean,
well,
and even I mean, they're being a bit controversial here, but even if they find a way, would they actually put it out there? Because it will change everything, won't it?
Well, I think if there's money to be made, they'll put it out there. You know, they were begrudging about making a glucose monitor, and it was Dr. Richard Bernstein, a type 1 diabetic that went back to school in his 40s to become a medical doctor, because he was trying to say, hey, we need to be encouraging people to test their blood sugar, and nobody would listen to him as a non-medical professional. So he went back to school in his 40s, became a medical doctor, and then started pitching it. And finally, they're like, okay, he has credentials. We know who he is. We'll put it out there. And now look how easy it is. Everybody pricks their finger and tests their blood sugar. That diabetic for sure, non-diabetic are even starting to get in on that bandwagon. And now that we have the CGMs like the NutriSense, I use the Freestyle Libre here in America. You know, these are tools that are out there. It's not that big of a stretch to think that if they're making money off of those things, they could easily make money off of an insulin at home test.
Yeah. So one of the things I know a lot of people, I even just people who were on that experiment with me, some of them are saying, oh, I'm now going to go keto, you know, which is great, you know, for them. One of the things that I find talking to people is when they ask me, what is this keto thing? What is this low carb thing? And they engage me in conversation. I know as soon as I mention high fat, good fats, they just go, you know, because it terrorizes them, because we've been so fed that story about, you know, saturated fat clogging our arteries and killing us. I mean, could you, you know, again, your up-to-date understanding of that, could you share it with the people? Because I know that's, if they could go over the fear of that, it might help them really move into a healthier lifestyle.
Well, and see, here's the thing. It's like we have pretty much not been fearful of fat in the research realm for about a decade and a half. If you look at the research that comes out, they're constantly talking about high fat. And of course, when people think high fat, they think, oh my gosh, we throw in sticks of butter on the plate. You know, I think we lose this notion that fat has 9 calories per gram and carbohydrate and protein only have 4. So it's not this gargantuan amount of fat. It's just what's naturally occurring in meat, for example. So let's look at a ribeye steak. Ribeye steaks, fattier cuts. In that, you look at it on the outside. Wow, look at that big old piece of protein. Well, would it surprise you to know that that piece of protein is actually about 70%, calorically speaking, fat? 65, 70. And people are shocked. Oh my gosh, all I see is the red and it must be protein. And you're missing the point here. So I think that's the first thing you can do to quell people's fear is, yes, it's high fat, but look at it. It's food. It's real food.
Yeah.
Then they want to play the argument about, well, what about it clogging your artery? Okay, show me the randomized controlled clinical trial that has shown that saturated fat clogs arteries and gives you heart disease. Newsflash, it doesn't exist. It never has existed. It was built on a theory, and I don't have to repeat the Ansel Keys research that was out there that was flawed many years ago. But the point being, it was flawed from the beginning.
Yeah.
And never was true. And it was all predicated on the cholesterol issue, which is why I wrote this book here, that people just felt like, oh my gosh, eat more fat, it's going to raise my cholesterol, it's going to give me heart disease, I'm going to die. And it's like, all those fears have been acquiesced. I mean, read The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz. There's been so many books put out there that kind of puts an end to it. There's another great cholesterol book called The Cholesterol Myth by Dr. Steven Sinatra and Dr. Johnny Bowden, which is outstanding. They're a little more geeky than my book, but they give you why fat is really not the enemy. And what we should be doing is shifting the attention, because if fat is feared solely because of the cardiovascular risks, I think that's where we have an opportunity to educate. Okay, would it surprise you to know that you can't have cardiovascular issues without inflammation? Oh, wow, that makes sense. Well, would it surprise you to know that fat does not raise inflammation levels? Saturated fat does a little bit, but it's in a healthy way. The other fats do not raise inflammation levels. Oh, wow, I didn't know that. You want to know what raises inflammation levels. And then there's where you bring in the education piece. Well, actually, it's carbohydrates, even the so-called healthy whole grains, and it's vegetable oil. So if you're cooking in canola oil or corn oil and all the rest of those oils, or you're eating like even nuts that have been roasted in cottonseed oil and soybean oil here in America, all of them are pretty much, unless you buy raw.
Yep.
That's what's raising your inflammation levels. And so then you have those conversations. I think it's an easy one to debunk now because we have the knowledge, the research, and it's just a matter of convincing people individually, okay, here's the truth.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that convinced me, apart from your book and then listening to your podcast, and various people just blew me away, Eric Westman and, you know, and Tim Noakes and stuff. What happened for me was hearing, I'm going to use this word, disease after disease after disease after disease, people backing out of them because they've done this keto thing. I mean, could you maybe just again help the watcher to maybe mention some of the diseases that you know? Okay, yeah. They're anecdotal, most of them, but they're not all, no longer, not all anecdotal. Can you mention just some of them so that people can begin to get the width of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, in my book, Keto Clarity, in the back part, we have several chapters, including like this one, the solid science we have of the therapeutic use of ketosis. And Dr. Westman did a great job in that part of the book. You can definitely ask him about this next week, but of kind of explaining how to read research and what the good studies are versus the bad studies. But we looked at some pretty solid research, and even ketogenic diets came on the scene 1921, so a century ago, for epileptic seizures. Like we've known about this forever, long before anticonvulsant drugs came along. They were using a ketogenic diet for epilepsy, and that's just one thing, controls the seizures. And then you've got people that have type 2 diabetes, and even if we go back to the 1920s again, type 1 diabetics were also using a ketogenic diet, very high fat, very low carb, because their body didn't make insulin. It was basically a death sentence when you got type 1 diabetes back before insulin was founded and created in the 1930s. So before insulin, they put these kids on keto and they survived and they were able to thrive, but they had to keep very strictly high levels of fat and very, very low levels of protein and carbohydrate. just so their bodies would have a strong enough level of ketones that would be that alternative fuel source for them. So they weren't relying on glucose, so the insulin wasn't needed. And then, of course, insulin came along and they forgot all about that. So, but type 2 diabetes, like if you have type 2 diabetes right now, that is curable.
Yeah.
That it's curable. All you have to do is get your body into a nutritional state of ketosis and sustain it, and do all the things with your lifestyle. Go out in sunshine, breathe, move, all the things that we talked about earlier, sleep well. And that can come down very quickly. Your A1C will drop very significantly when you go keto. So these people that get like an 8 A1C, oh my gosh, I have uncontrollable diabetes, I'm gonna have to shoot myself with insulin soon. If it's no, you can come off of all the medications with a doctor's help, of course. In fact, Dr. Westman will tell you the story about the record that he had for one patient who was taking insulin. I won't spoil it, but ask him about what was the record. One day he got this much insulin off of a patient. It's going to shock you. I don't want to spoil his punchline, but it's pretty stuff. But these are the kinds of things that, type 2 diabetes, obviously weight loss is another reason that people go on it. All the metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance factors that people have, things like PCOS for women, irritable bowel syndrome, GERD, heartburn, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I mean, that's the things we have solid science on, and not to mention we're developing ones on some of the brain health issues like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and some cancers that are glycolytically dependent. If you starve them of glucose and fuel your body with ketones instead, it can kill them off. Yeah. So many things that science is going to be vetting this out much more solidly here in the coming years.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, some people are getting benefit from improving the quality of their exercise by, turning away from the carb type idea to that's obviously Professor Tim Noakes was talking about that the last time we were on. But anything you've noticed about sports people, perhaps?
Yeah, I think the whole cardio is king is pretty much dead. I think most of the ones that are in that space now are talking about high intensity interval training, the whole HIIT concept, and obviously resistance training and targeted for whole body, even like the slow lift to maximal exhaustion of the muscles in a very short period of time. I just love that there's so many methodologies being put out there rather than walking on a treadmill. When I was losing my weight on the Atkins diet in 2004, after 1 month on the diet, I was so energetic, I wanted to go exercise. So I went to the gym and did what everybody else did. You go to any gym here in America, the vast majority of the equipment in there is treadmills. So people are on there reading a magazine, reading a magazine, and you're not doing a darn thing. And for me, I thought I was doing something good, and I was pretty big boy. I needed to be doing some kind of movement, but I quickly realized that's not the kind of movement that puts muscle on your body, which we were talking about anti-aging earlier. That's going to help you live longer. And all the other things that are just, you're getting so many benefits from exercise that helps with ketosis, helps with stress management, helps with so many aspects that go beyond muscle building.
Okay. This is a question I want to ask on behalf of a lot of the people who will watch this too. It's not an easy question to ask because we get misunderstood here, but I'm sure they know I wouldn't, consciously do anything with a misunderstanding. Obviously, funnily enough, we're well into this process. I think this is the 21st one we've done. We've yet to interview a woman, apart from a couple of women who were on a panel thing. I haven't had a woman yet. I keep putting out to them. They keep saying, "Oh yeah, we'll come on," but I haven't got them tied down yet. But what one does hear that for guys, men going into keto or low carb, it seems to be relatively easy. But for a lot of women, it can be a bit more of a wider, varied sort of experience. Given that you've talked to, and I've heard you talking to lots of prominent women in the field, Anything you can maybe say from your experiences talking that might help the women?
You need to get Jackie Eberstein on your show. So she and Dr. Westman can help connect you to her as well.
Thank you.
She worked with Dr. Atkins in his clinic
Yes,
since
I've heard her.
early.
Yeah, yeah.
What's that?
I've heard her. You're right, on one of your shows. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So she's wonderful. And one time she talked about this on one of the events I was at where she was speaking, and she said, ladies, you're not going to be able to get in ketosis at certain times of the month. And it's just a natural process of the woman's body that if you're menstruating, it's just simply not going to happen. You're going to lose your ketones. You will see an elevation in your blood sugar, and it's all natural. And of course, women are like, well, it's so hard. And it is. Like, I have empathy for them because they have to go through this. Obviously, menstruating women, not postmenopausal, have to go through this kind of struggle because they're hormones. And women's hormones, thank God I'm a guy. I'm glad we're guys, Jack, because women's hormones are just whacked, man. It makes it very difficult. But difficult does not mean impossible. I know plenty of women that get into ketosis very easily, and they're able to sustain it. And yes, they go through their time of the month. They have that little hiccup of 6, 7, 8 days, however long the cycle is, and then they're right back on it again. I think some women, they don't know this information about their cycle messing up ketosis. They try to start this, or they're in the midst of it. Oh no, I lost all my ketones. Oh no, I gained some weight. And it's like, yeah, you're on your cycle. That's why. So give it a little time, be patient. So I think that's the major disparity between the sexes is guys don't have a menstruation period. And so we're able to just go straight through with ketosis, whereas the women don't. Then the postmenopausal women, they have an extra wrinkle because their estrogen levels have to be balanced out appropriately. Yep. And when one hormone is off, that messes all of them up, including your insulin, which could stay elevated in a postmenopausal woman, which can make it difficult to get into ketosis. So there's a lot of X factors with women. I have a heart for that. I usually just try to console them by saying, just be patient, realize you have these challenges. Challenges are not an impossibility.
No. I'm wondering whether or not the keto movement, given that for me, what I bought into, apart from you and everybody that you introduced me to and having a go with it, it was this kind of notion to me that most people were in it not to lose weight, but for their health. There was endless people who came from other lifestyles to keto and they found improvement. And I suppose I have this faith, maybe wrongly, but I have this faith that if something better shows up, then most of us who are on it would just go there. Do you think that's true?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that's the essence of science.
Yeah.
As I think when Dr. Atkins put his notion out there, cut your carbs, eat more fat, blah, 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 he didn't really pay much attention to food quality. Then came along the paleo community, and paleo was all about food quality, but not really about macronutrients. Okay. And then it was refined there to go to keto, and keto is like, okay, we're going to kind of take the concept of Atkins, add some of the food quality, and add one more step of, okay, now get some biomarkers to confirm that you're actually burning fat for fuel. Then you've got the carnivore movement coming from that, where people are like, okay, well, we're seeing that the people that are still having trouble tend to be still eating carbohydrates, and they should just be focusing on the main thing, the fat and the protein, so thus the meat. I think we're constantly evolving in our understanding of things, and yes, it'll keep evolving. And if something comes along that says, well, hey, all of you that eat keto, here's something you can add or take away that will improve it more, I think every one of us that is in this for the right reason, that is health, our own personal health, and then those of us that are educating others, we're going to shift as well. I get pegged a lot of times, you're the low carb guy, you're the keto guy, you want everybody to eat that way. I'm like, I have never told everybody to eat keto or low carb. Yeah. I share my experience. I interview people in the space so that you get the information, and then you do what you will with it. For me, we have become kind of this cult of personality that, oh, Jimmy Moore talks about keto, so he must only be about keto. And like lately, I've been talking about some of the COVID-19 stuff and the race relations stuff and just general things. Oh my gosh, you're not allowed to have an opinion outside keto. I'm like, yeah, screw you. You don't know very well, because I am more than just keto. How boring would the world be if all I ever talked about for the rest of my life was keto?
Yeah, yeah. And just moving on, a couple of more questions. You mentioned obviously Atkins. I remember way back when Atkins kind of hit the UK and I got the book and stuff, and I was traveling over to North America to do gigs and stuff. And what was happening was my wife and I would go and we would go around all the health food stores and pack up all the Atkins products because they didn't have them in the UK yet, and coming home with them, suitcases full of this stuff. And, now with the keto, fortunately, I don't buy any keto products. They don't seem to exist in the UK like they do, obviously, in America. I was on holiday back in February in Florida, and we saw all the bars and stuff. It's just completely alien to what's going on over here compared to that. But one of the things that helped me in the beginning was to know that I liked bread, and to know that I liked sausage rolls and stuff like that. And so what I was able to do was find decent keto alternatives, using cauliflower rice certainly, but coconut flour and other flours. And I just wonder what your thought is about that. I know that you occasionally recommend products on your obviously almost every time you're recommending stuff on your podcast, but what's your view about that? Do you think people should maybe think ahead and say, okay, what is it I tend to like? Should I find an alternative keto thing and use it for a little while and gradually go? Or is there anything specific about that we should? For example, almonds. They've got issues around some of the what's the word I'm looking for? They're high in that sort of stuff you get in green vegetables. It can be an issue for a lot of people. Certainly for me, and the word's just not jumping in my head right now, but. So I stopped using almond flour and I use coconut flour, but anything you've noticed?
Is it the oxalates you're referring to?
That's the word, Jimmy, yeah.
So my thinking about those kinds of things is, okay, if you feel like you need it and you just started, go ahead and use them. It's all right. I think anything that is a shift away from the crap you were eating to something that's better is always good. It's kind of like when I didn't tell this part of my story. I used to drink 16 cans of Coca-Cola a day back in my high carb eating days. Wow. And when I switched over to the Atkins diet, I went from 16 cans of Coca-Cola, sugary Coca-Cola, to about 6 to 8 cans of diet soda. And of course, a lot of people kind of poo-poo on that. Oh my gosh, it's the worst. You should go right to the cleanest of the clean. And I'm like, think of where the person is before they go there. You have to meet them where they are. Yeah. Now, if you're a long time into this and you're still eating on a daily basis all these products, then okay, yeah, you should have learned by now that's not the basis. It's why we put the emphasis on just eat real food. Yeah. And as you mature and as you get further and further away from those cravings of the carby foods, you don't find you need those. Now, does that mean I never have an almond flour-based kind of treat every once in a while? Of course I do. But it's not in fact, I would say now it's not even once a month. Like I'll get send me things, and if it's something that I would never eat, I throw it to my chickens in the backyard. They eat it and give me some good eggs from it. What's funny is sometimes I throw those things and the chickens don't even eat it. I'm like, ooh, chickens eat everything and they don't touch it. Okay, there's something wrong with it. That's kind of my litmus test. Is this good? Oh, they're eating it up. Okay, let me look at the ingredients now. But I think in general, you're right. We need to be moving more away from those kinds of things because of the oxalates and some of the other issues. But at the end of the day, that's why I kind of love a keto carnivore kind of approach, because when you can only eat animal-based products and foods, what snack is there to eat? What processed food other than, do you guys have the Epic bars there in the UK?
No, not that I'm aware of. No.
But like beef jerky and that kind of thing.
Beef jerky, yeah.
So you can't have a Quest bar, you can't have an Atkins bar, you can't have a cookie made of almond flour if you're carnivore. So yeah, I think that the more you can move away from those things, the better. But I mean, let's face it, people are convenience food driven, and they want things that will be easy for them to buy, pick up, take home, and eat. That's the way, at least in the westernized society, we have been trained. Is you go to the store, you buy packages, and you eat food out of packages. It's such a foreign concept in the modern age to just eat things in their natural state.
Yeah, inevitably, I know the questions jumped into my head, but I'll just say it quickly, then I'll get to the close. You must have heard the arguments time and again. Most of what I've heard is that our human's colon is designed so that we can eat meat, right? It's not really designed for vegetables. But on the other hand, our mouth, our molars and all the rest of it are designed for, eating vegetables and fruits and not eating meat. We don't have, sort of the fang type teeth. I mean, what have you heard about that? What's your sort of opinion about that?
Yeah, I think that's an argument that we're omnivores. We're not carnivores. We're not herbivores. We're omnivores. And I think Michael Pollan had it right. He didn't have everything right in his books, but one of the things he had right is we are omnivores, and we have this dilemma that we have to figure out what the right mix is between the meat and between the plant matter that works best for us. And the beautiful thing is, it's not the same prescription for everybody. Yeah. So some of us will lean more to the carnivore end of things. Others will lean more towards the herbivore end of things, but everybody ends up somewhere on this spectrum in the middle of those two extremes.
Yeah. Okay. So finally, Jimmy, what's currently going on in terms of what you're thinking of doing? You're writing another book. What's coming out soon? How can people find you? What would you want us to look for?
Yeah, so I have all kinds of ideas in my head, none of which are coming out in 2020 because this year, let's face it, it's just been messed up to the hilt. So I'm just kind of using this year to just kind of get my feet wet. I was on a 6-month sabbatical from September through the end of February. And so I've only been back for a few months. I'm going to use the rest of 2020 to just kind of recalibrate. The world has changed quite dramatically just in the past few months. So kind of assess where I want to go. I still want to be talking nutrition, but I don't think explicit keto is the message anymore. So Jimmy Rants is my show I do right here in this studio, 11 a.m. Eastern time on Instagram every day. And so I want to keep doing that. I want to keep pushing the envelope of the cutting edge. I'm not really doing anything profound as far as a book idea. I have a bunch up here that I'm thinking about. During my sabbatical, I learned a lot about childhood trauma, my own childhood trauma. I think that's a missing piece in a lot of people's health journey. They're not dealing with past, not just childhood trauma, but really any trauma. So that's a big passion of mine. In fact, I was slated to speak at Dr. Westman's ADAPT event to give a talk about childhood trauma, and then COVID came and shut everything down. So that's a big project that's on my mind right now. But how do you find me? LLDLC.com, livinlavitalocarb.com. And then this show right here that I do on this studio, Jimmy Rants, JimmyRants.com.
Okay, Jimmy, fantastic. Thanks for everything you've given us there in that hour that always flies by, just poof, but cram-packed with stuff. I can't thank you enough, Jimmy. I know the audience are going to love this, and we'll have lots of comments after, because it'll be on Facebook first, and then it'll go on YouTube. But so thanks, Jimmy. Everybody, what can we say? Jimmy Moore, the legend, spent an hour with us. Cheers, Jimmy. Thank you.
Cheers, Jack.